Okay, anybody in the room is watching the series or is willing to admit they're watching the series? Oh, okay. Proud. So today, actually, as a tribute to the series, which has won many Emmy Awards and other things, and is coming back for the last season next week on the 14th of April, we thought about providing a little bit of stories of how we think that the Game of Thrones is actually happening in the real world, and the real world Game of Thrones is a lot crazier than what we're watching on TV. And I promise not to talk about politics at all today. So what we're claiming here is that we're having fights and wars all over the economy, technology or non-technology. Specifically, we're going to discuss a few things, including, the war between, or the quiet war between US and China, Amazon fighting the world. We have, e-commerce versus the physical retail stores, a little bit about tech wars, media wars, and last but not least, business models. So the first major war I think that is undergoing today, quietly or less quietly, is, who is going to be dominating the world? Is it going to be China or the US? Obviously, technology has become a weapon, not necessarily, weapon technology, but all technology is a weapon. And there is definitely a war of who's going to have the most advanced technology. Now, I'll tell you, in terms of the Israeli tech world, we're exactly in the middle between the US and China. And we were lucky enough. We're lucky to have the US coming into Israel, investing, looking for interesting technologies, investing a lot of money for many years. But guess what? China did exactly the same. Although about 15 or 20 years later, we're seeing Chinese coming to Israel, by the way, Chinese of all spectrums, all the way up to people like Jack Ma, who is a frequent visitor in Israel, coming to look for technologies, to invest in technologies, to buy technologies. Only recently, Alibaba bought a company in Israel. And one of the things that I would like to say in this room is that I'm not sure that we Israelis can actually stay ambivalent in terms of where the money comes from. We may very soon need to decide who is a friend of ours and who we're actually dropping as a friend in order to maintain our business in one of those regions of the world. And you can imagine what I think is going to happen, but I'm not going to say it out loud. The US in this sort of quiet or less quiet war is not really gentle, okay? So the US, in places where there are technologies, Chinese technologies, sitting in the nerve systems of anything that relates to the US is not waiting and attacking. They're attacking, and we've seen things going on with ZTE, with Huawei, Trump putting tariffs. I mean, this is very tough. But guess what? In a war, usually, both sides suffer. So what happened after, all this retaliation of the U.S. Against China, we're seeing the U.S. companies actually getting hurt because, like we heard from Simpson today, the flag is made in China. Guess what? Many things are made in China. So when the U.S. is telling the Chinese, we don't want you anymore, the Chinese are showing Apple, Nvidia, and other companies how much they are important, how much their markets are very important for these companies' market shares. And actually, we've seen a very big drop in market share because of loss of revenues from this region. So, it's a question who's going to win. Let's briefly talk about Amazon because we can have a whole day about Amazon. I'll just say one thing. Amazon is probably taking over the world. We know this. They're already #1 in online retail. I don't know if anybody can compete with them. Cloud, they're the fastest and largest cloud platform. They are the fulfillment company, the largest in the world with distribution centers all over, anywhere you can imagine. People are not aware, but media-wise, Amazon is only third after Google and Facebook, and it's larger than many others. And it's also being rumored to buy Netflix, so it's even going to be much bigger. What's next? Food, we already saw that, Amazon acquired Whole Foods, healthcare, they're taking over, pharma, etc. What has happened with this war, or Amazon war against all of us, is that all kinds of other companies, by the way, large companies, who are starting to feel uncomfortable on their chairs and having to do all kinds of collaborations in order to fight Amazon. And we're seeing companies like Google having to partner with others to fight Amazon. And I think this, you can believe me, this is a big deal. In terms of Amazon's size, we're hearing all kinds of statements, some of them from regulators who are saying that they're too big or too big to fail, meaning they have to split up. Others are saying they have to split up not because they're too big, just because they will be worth a lot more if they split up. So if you take, for example, their cloud business by itself, if it was a single company or a separate company, it would probably be worth very close to what the entire Amazon is worth. So there's a big debate about splitting up. What we're seeing is, by the way, very weird situation where the European Union, which is very, very aggressive with all these companies and issuing fines, they're actually saying, the EU commissioner is actually saying, you don't need to split up. I'll just keep on fining you when you cross the borders. But we are hearing from US politicians, especially the Democrats, that they are requiring these companies to break up. So it will be interesting to see how it evolves. Retail has winter come to retail? We're seeing bloodbath in retail. We're seeing a lot more stores closing than opening. There is a question about, is online retail going to surpass one day in the future the physical retail? Obviously, all the retailers' market shares are dropping, but I do want to mention, and we're seeing it a lot in Israel, that although everybody looks at online retail, we're seeing a lot of investments going into physical stores. Smarter, more sophisticated, maybe without personnel, but definitely all these companies, specifically Amazon, Walmart, and others. By the way, Walmart CEO was just in Israel about a week ago. All looking for technologies to make the physical stores smarter, not necessarily transform this world to the digital world. Let's touch very quickly on another sort of war. I call it the battle of the taxes. What I mean here is that, I think every Western or actually non-Western nation has realized that technology is a good thing for the economy. So everybody wants all the tech companies to come and reside and have their headquarters and R&D centers within their jurisdiction. In order to get this interest, what nations are starting to do is to lower the taxes. I'm better for you. You're not going to pay taxes. Come to be with me. What has happened here was actually a downward spiral where specifically the European Union realized that each nation within Europe starting to beat the other nation in terms of how low their taxes are, eventually leading everybody to drop to almost zero. And guess what? They started collaborating and decided that the EU is going to act as a union, and they're going to stop this crazy war, and they're going to stop the decrease of the taxes. An interesting thing is, and we've seen this in the US, that there was a vibe of cities wanting to attract, not countries, but cities wanting to attract technology companies to their jurisdictions as well. Very quickly, people realized that bringing Amazon headquarters to your town, and I don't know if we have people here from the New York City something, bringing Amazon to your town has a lot of implications. It has implications on the amount of money that your real estate costs, and it actually was decided that it's going to create some more inequality than what New York City already has, and the people actually kicked out Amazon. So HQ2 is not going to be in New York because the people of New York didn't want it to be here. Very quickly on media. Media is another space where companies are fighting each other. I'll just tell you from a banker's eyes, what we're seeing here is abundance of debt that these companies are taking on their balance sheet because they have to acquire more and more either content or other companies. Disney spent, you can see it on the slide, $70 billion to buy media companies. It's a crazy war. And then on the side, we're starting to hear about all these video-oriented, YouTube-type companies that have very little money invested with them and are eating the world of the giant media companies. I'm running out of time, so I'll do it quickly. In terms of business models, you know, hardware is a killer. For those of you who followed Apple, Apple is being penalized for selling a lot of hardware as opposed to having a more software as revenue streams, and it's paying in their share price. What's the solution? SaaS. Everybody knows what SaaS is, almost. It's actually services survival. We think that if you don't do services, you're not going to be worth anything. Look at the enterprise value for software. When you're selling a one-time, you're getting a much lower multiple than you're selling it as a service. So this is obviously going to change the world. A newcomer to this space is actually gaming with Google, new service. I tend to think that all the companies that are making money on consoles, the gaming consoles, are in a big, big problem, and they have to reconsider their business model. Digital natives, those companies who were born digital or all digital without any physical space, they're taking over the world. All the unicorns have, you know, they're all digital natives. It just makes sense. It's cheap, it's easy, it's intuitive, and thank God we're seeing IPOs of these things. So actually people are going to start making money on these things. Lyft was first. All the rest of them are all digital native companies. We had a bunch of discussions about cyber, so I don't think I need to say a lot about it. I'll just say it hasn't skipped the Game of Thrones. For those of you who watched the series know that in the previous season, the last episode was leaked, which is a tremendous loss of money for HBO. So, you know, I just thought I'll mention it, and I hope next season they're going to keep their IP closer. And who will win the Game of Thrones? I have no idea. Thank you.